Okay, last lesson of chapter 2. And then we'll be almost... We won't. No, just kidding. I said it would be 20% through the book, but we won't. Sorry. Bummer deal. We are learning how to compare and order fractions and decimals. That means putting them in order from greatest to least, or least to greatest, however they ask. So, first thing we're going to talk about is a rational number. A rational number is a number that can be written as a fraction with integers for its numerator and denominator. Look that up if you need to. Okay, so we are going to compare the fractions with a less than or equal to sign. So the first thing we need to do is we need to rewrite these as equivalent fractions. Equivalent fractions mean equal, so we need to rewrite them with a denominator of 72 because that is the common denominator of 8 and 9. Alright, so we take 7/9. What times 9 gets me 72? 8. And then 7 times 8. So we get 56 over 72. Okay? And then, what times 8 gets me 9? Or 8 times gets me 72? 9. So we do 9 here and 9 there, and we do 5 times 9 is 45, and 8 times 9 is 72. So we write as fractions with common denominators. Okay? So, because 56 is bigger than 45, 56 over 72 is greater than 45 over 72. Which means that 7/9 is greater than 5/8. Now another way I like to show how to do it, which is a little bit easier, is you multiply diagonally. 7 times 8 is 56, 9 times 5 is 45, and because 56 is bigger, 7/9 is bigger. I don't mind which way you do it. Finding common denominators might be how you learned how to do last year. Maybe common denominators is not something you're real great at yet. Well, then I would suggest you do the other way I just showed you. It's much simpler, and you get the correct answer. So, B, both fractions can be written with a denominator of 35. Okay, 5 and 7, common denominator is 35. So, what times 5 gets me 35? 7 does. So this is a negative 2 times 7. There's one negative, so it's negative 14 over 35. So, then we have 7 times what gets me 35? Times 5. So, negative 3 times 5 is negative 15. Over 35. So we wrote with common denominators. Okay, now you have to remember though that negative numbers work a little bit differently, and that negative 14 is closer to 0 than negative 15. So actually negative 14 35ths is greater than negative 15 35ths. So negative 2/5 is greater than negative 3/7. Now, you can do the same thing. You can do 2 times 7 and get negative 14. And you can do 5 times 3 and get negative 15. And it would work the same way. Okay? Essentially, you're doing the same thing down here. Okay? You're just multiplying by the opposite denominator. It's just a longer, drawn-out way to do it. Now we're going to compare decimals. It's easier to think of decimals if you think of money, because money is something that most of us know a little bit about, whether we have some pennies or we have some dollars. Okay? I personally only have pennies. So, We know money only goes out 2 places, things like that. So the first thing we want to do is we want to line up the decimal points. We want to take our 2 decimals and line them up just like they did here. Okay? Now, the tenths and the hundredths place are the same. Both have a 4 in the tenths place. Both have a 2 in the hundredths place. So now we're going to compare the thousandths again like they did. Hold on. Okay. Like they did here. Okay? Now, because in the thousandths place you have a 7 and a 5, the 7 is greater. So because the 7's greater, 0.427 is greater than 0.425. So we're going to compare the thousandths. Okay. The next one we lined up here. We see that 0.73 is a repeating decimal because it has a line over it, right? So we're going to line up the decimal points. Now the tenths and the hundredths are the same again, right? The tenths is a 7, the hundredths is a 3. Now because the 0.73 is repeating, just the 3 is repeating. So see how they put a 3 in the thousandths place, so it matches up and has a thousandths place like the 4. So we're going to compare the thousandths, and we see that the 4 is bigger than the 3. So because the 4 is bigger than the 3, 0.73 repeating is less than 0.734. And the last example, order 4/5, 0.93, and 0.9 from least to greatest. Now you have to change those all to the same type of number. And because 2 of these numbers are already decimals, it would be easier to just change the 4/5 to a decimal. Now remember yesterday we said we could make an equivalent fraction and change it to a decimal real easy. Because that's a 5, we're going to try and come up with an equivalent fraction with a denominator that's a power of 10. And because it's a single digit, I'm going to see if I can get it to 10. Well, of course I can, because 5 times 2 is 10. So 4 times 2 is 8. And that is 8/10. There's 1 0, so we move the decimal 1 place left, and we get 0.8 like they did here. Okay? So, you could also do long division, or just know that 8/10 is 0.8, or use a calculator when you got to this point. So, the next thing is we want to write as decimals, not only decimals, but with the same number of places. They go out to the same place. That's why they have a 0 after the 8, because this number goes out 2 places. So this is going to be 0.93, and because this needs to go out 2 places, we put a 0 at the end because it doesn't change the value. 0.9 and 0.90 are the same exact thing. And now we're going to graph those on a number line. They have them graphed on a number line, but you could also line them up like they did in the previous example of 0.8, 0.93, and 0.90. And you can look at the tenths place and say, well, the 8 is the smallest because these both have 9s, and then this one's out, right? And then you can look at the 0.93 and the 90 and be like, well, both of the tenths place is a 9, but the 3 is greater than 0, so this is the middle number and this is the largest number. Or just look at that as 80 cents, 93 cents, and 90 cents. And that's where the money thing comes in. So, the values on a number line increase as we move left to right, which we've talked about. So we're going to place the decimals in order from least to greatest, which we figured out here, or smallest to largest. Okay? So we're going to do the following. It'd be real easy to put 0.8, 0.9, 0.93, but we want to rewrite them in the original form. So 0.8 was not 0.8 originally, it was 4/5. So we want to write 4/5. 0.9 was 0.9 originally, and then 0.93. So check it out on this one. You can do the cross multiplying or the common denominators, either way. Okay, get those done.